Hello and welcome to another edition of Back of the Grid, a short intro edition, all new short intro. Hope you like it. I'm joined as always by Chris.
I'm glad it wasn't me doing the intro because I absolutely would have just left silence after that short music.
I know, it's a bit of a shock, isn't it? And by Tom.
Hello, 15 extra seconds of content per episode now. Just saying.
So hopefully people don't disappear within 10 seconds. Please don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe if you're new, if you're watching on YouTube. And if you really like us, don't forget to visit our Patreon page and maybe bung us a like on there and maybe even a little bit more. This episode, we are going to talk about, we're going to make some mid-season predictions, and we're talking about 2024 contracts, and we're going to go through the inbox from all of you guys out there. We've got loads and loads and loads to get through. So we're going to go straight in. Shall we jump straight in with some mid-season predictions? We're making 3 each, according to this.
Yeah, we'll do the same as we did pre-season and do kind of one thing we're pretty sure is going to happen, one thing we think is like maybe likely, and then something unlikely that we'd maybe like to see but isn't necessarily going to happen.
Okay, I haven't really thought at all about this, so this
Neither
is
have I.
totally on the fly here. Like,
I've given it some thought, so I can go first if you want.
Yeah,
go on then. You why don't you hit us with your something that you do think will happen to begin with?
Something I think is likely is Red Bull won't get the clean sweep of every win this season. I think either Mercedes or McLaren are going to steal one win off them.
I feel like that's 2 predictions in one there, Chris. But
no, it's a prediction with an extra qualifier. I feel like just saying Red Bull will lose a race is way too easy. So
yeah, well, I mean,
if anyone's going to do it, it'll be Mercedes or McLaren, I think.
That's the vibe I was going to go down, but never mind. Thing that is likely to happen. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to go the other way. I think Red Bull, not necessarily Max Verstappen. I mean, it's impossible for Max Verstappen to win every race anyway, but it is possible, obviously, for him to win all of the remaining races. I'm going to say Red Bull are going to win all of the remaining races. I'm going to just go straight in there and have it. I'm here for it.
It would be something to see.
Okay. I'm just going to go completely different altogether. We will get a podium that doesn't have a Red Bull on it.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Before the end of the season.
Yeah,
I'm also here for that.
Which implies they're going to lose a race because they drive into each other, is what I'm reading between the lines there.
Potentially, it could be.
It's either that or somewhere like Mexico hurts their engines and they have... Because I feel like it's going to be... The only way Verstappen's losing a race is if he has a mechanical failure or someone crashes into him, right? Like,
yeah, or if he makes a mistake, which seems unlikely. And that car seems quite easy to drive, so the chances of him making a mistake are pretty low.
Verstappen making a mistake this season just isn't going to happen.
Well, yeah, and that combined with his form, easy to drive car in the form of his life, he's not going to make a mistake, is he? He's not, that thing is on rails. Red Bull, like I feel like Mexico, Red Bull are more likely to. I think it's one of those races they'll run away with because it's got such a long straight. They're going to get the old single. What is it? The old single. What's the name of the little mini wing underneath the big wing? The beam wing, the single beam wing.
Yeah.
I think we'll be using that and just smashing everyone.
I mean, for context, my thoughts come from a circuit like Singapore, where there's more chance for mistakes to be like terminal for a race or something like that, and where if something does happen where like Perez is towards the back or Max has an accident in qualifying or something like that happens, it's harder for them to get through the field. So that's my kind of backup, like nicheness of it, is that's where it'll happen as well, but I'm not going to go that far as an official prediction.
Fair.
Not an official prediction, just a tentative prediction.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go down a level then to something we think might happen.
Shall I go first again?
Yeah, you should go first, Chris. I feel like you thought the most about this. We need to lead. We need to take your example, and you can lead.
I'm gonna say that Ricciardo and Tsunoda are going to... So this is a little vague. We might need to hone in on exactly what this means. But I think Ricciardo and Tsunoda are going to be pretty evenly matched for the rest of the season. And that ultimately they will both stay in the same team for the following year.
I find that a bit... That's not a very exciting prediction, Chris, I'm afraid. You're going to have to elaborate somewhat.
What shall I say? I think it's hard to say they'll stay with a certain number of points for each other because the whole team's only scored like 3 points all season. But I don't think either of them will be far and away faster than the other one. I think they're going to sort of flip-flop in which of the two of them finishes ahead in races.
Okay.
And I definitely don't think either of them are getting the Red Bull promotion.
Yeah, that's a safer prediction.
Yeah,
that should have been like your first prediction,
That's
your
too
most
easy.
likely prediction. Yeah.
So you're saying that essentially Ricciardo and Tsunoda remain Alpha Tauri drivers next year? That's the pairing. Okay.
I'm gonna go for another driver eviction.
Ooh.
This might sound crazy, and it's probably ridiculous, but I wonder if Aston Martin will see sense and ditch Lance Stroll because he's costing them some mega points, isn't he?
I mean, when you look at it in comparison, we talked about it last week, didn't we? That was the one where I think I was highlighting, like, that's the biggest gap realistically between point scoring teammates. Like,
he's going to cost them third in the constructors. Like at
At
the
this
Ferrari,
rate,
are only
He's
5
already
points
cost them
behind.
second.
Yeah, it's already cost them second,
Yeah.
and it could well cost them third. I mean, it's got to happen one day, right?
Yep, it's got to. Tom, what about you? Medium likelihood.
yeah,
prediction.
medium tier. I'm gonna have to very quickly check what's where in the calendar for this one. I apologize because that makes it more significant. So, hang on. Max Verstappen will have sealed the title before we visit America. So basically, by the end of Qatar, round 18, I think that's quite easy. Do you know what? No, I'll go earlier than that. He will have done it
Japan?
either in or before Japan. Yeah, like that is the weekend where it maybe becomes official. Is Japan?
Okay, you're hedging your bets there.
It becomes official in Japan.
I want either in Japan or before Japan. Which
It becomes official in Japan, is what I'm saying. So, like, maybe
Discord is telling us Japan's the first race he can actually wrap it up.
well, there you go then.
Saying he can do it as early as mathematically possible.
There you go then. Done.
I was wondering that the other day. I was trying to figure it out. I'm glad we figured that out because it's very difficult to work that one out because of all the sprint races and the
it's a bit different this year.
Whole lap, extra points and things. Not whole lap points, fastest lap points and things. So yeah, pretty hectic one to figure out. So whatever mathematicians came up with that one, well done to you, fair play. And then let's have some predictions that we think are less likely or a bit more outlandish predictions. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying something
just something
unlikely?
Outlandish. Something unlikely.
Outlandish.
Yeah. That we think there's still maybe an outside chance of. I've got 2 in mind for this. You'll have to tell me if this one is outlandish enough.
Oh, I will.
Which is that Hamilton will beat Perez to second in the drivers.
Ooh, I think that's pretty outlandish, yeah.
It's outlandish considering the cars, for sure.
Yeah.
At the moment.
I would say right now that's very outlandish.
Yeah, form is something else, but yeah. I mean, he has no right finishing ahead of him, does he, with the car? So I'd say it's an outlandish one. I'd let you.
But
have
he's
that.
also only 40 points behind.
Yeah,
which ain't much.
That's the thing about Lewis Hamilton, though. He finishes in positions that he's got absolutely no business finishing in. That's how he's won so many world championships. So
it is true.
I think it's an interesting prediction, but also pretty unlikely, I think, in my own opinion. What about you, Tom? I'll let you go for the next one if you've got one.
A wild one. I'm going to go for... Oh, let me see. I'm going to go for both Ferraris finishing the season ahead of Fernando Alonso in the standings.
That's quite a good one.
So that's Leclerc and Sainz catching and passing Fernando Alonso in the standings.
Ooh,
I mean,
Fernando.
I think the trend of where Aston Martin have been going probably leans a bit in my favour, but there's still plenty of other teams between them, and Fernando is very capable of picking up points even in a bit of a dog of a car. So
And there's plenty of time for Aston Martin to develop their way back into it as well.
yeah, I mean, as well for perspective, I guess Fernando's on 150 points, and the other two haven't broken 100 yet. So they've still got quite a way to catch him up.
Yeah, we're predicting a pretty topsy-turvy season here. Towards
I mean,
it
is. It can be behind Verstappen.
Outlandish prediction. This might not be that outlandish, but I'm going to go Valtteri Bottas pole position.
Oof.
You'd need some pretty wild circumstances, but the same thing happened last year. Brazil last year, we had a sprint race pole for Magnussen in the Haas, was it?
Does
a
sprint race
the...
pole count? Are you talking any kind of pole position, not just an official one? Okay, just checking.
It's my prediction.
I mean, he's a very.
That's why I'm just checking it. That's why I'm just checking the specifics of what you're going for.
The Alpha's not been terrible in qualifying recently, actually, and Bottas does qualify well. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
you would.
Very unlikely, I think.
Well, yeah, I would.
Obviously, it's going to need some divine intervention, for that to happen. But I'd like to see it. I'd love to see it.
Weirder things have happened, man.
Yeah. Okay, so there we have it. That's all of our weird predictions for mid-season.
Revisit them at the end of the year.
These are going to be fun to revisit, along with the ones that we did pre-season, I think.
Which I have no memory of at this point.
These should at least be a little bit more plausible. I'm hoping that we get more of these close or correct than the ones pre-season. But
well, yeah, I mean, we've got more knowledge about this season as
you
we
would
make
hope
these
so.
predictions. So
exactly. And
but then,
I've looked. Some of the old ones were mental.
Okay, well, we'll revisit those at the end of the year. Right, let's move on to 2024 contracts. Of course, it's mid-season, so AKA silly season. Silly season hasn't really quite kicked in yet, other than
Not
maybe
that silly yet.
Yeah. There's one or two. I think it could get silly quite quickly if certain things happen. But let's just do a quick rundown of which teams are all set up for next year, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of next year for the teams that aren't quite fully set up. So, teams that have both drivers contracted already are Red Bull, Ferrari, Alpine. Although does that mean anything at Alpine?
Well, yeah.
McLaren. They're your four teams that are already set up for next year. Drivers contracted, job done.
I mean, we all know F1 contracts are
watertight.
Yeah, sure, that's the word I was searching for. Can we see any of those four realistically changing?
Well, yeah, you could imagine maybe, Gasly getting itchy feet. I think Gasly and Ocon have probably got itchy feet if something else were to come up, if they could find a way out of there and extricate themselves from the mess that is Alpine at the moment, then they might sort of try to. But that would be the icing on the cake for Alpine, wouldn't it?
It really would.
I mean, the only one that, despite what contracts say, that I think is, I guess maybe possible that the team's going to move someone is Red Bull, because we know what that's like, and we know that they're not technically contracted to one of the teams; they're contracted to Red Bull as a whole. The lovely loophole that they employ to all their contracts. So, yeah, I mean, technically, you could see a move there, and it not be a breach of either driver's contract technically. So, whether whichever driver came up would also be classified as still being a Red Bull driver.
So we're talking about Red Bull. Do you see Perez still there next
I
year?
think it probably depends on what performances Tsunoda and Ricciardo both put in between now and the end of the season. I think if Ricciardo gets up to speed very quickly and is even remotely ahead of Tsunoda by the end of the season, there's probably a good chance that they will switch for 2024. It's obviously too soon to be able to tell that, but I just feel like that's kind of the Red Bull way. And by, getting rid of De Vries and bringing Ricciardo back, they've shown that they're still very capable of making decisions like that, and that they're very willing to just move people if they're not happy with performance. So
I feel like Perez, he's still got his destiny in his own hands. And
agree.
I think he's going to need a real downturn in form to lose that seat, personally. I mean,
think
if one of my predictions comes true and Hamilton beats him to second, then he probably will lose his seat. But
I think so.
That's my least likely one for a reason.
I think it really just depends on his qualifying more than anything. It's like we've already talked about in recent episodes that when you actually look at his race finishes, they're technically not that bad when you consider where he's been starting from. His problem is where he's been starting from. So if he sorts that and gets on top of it, I don't think they'll feel the need to move him. But if that doesn't improve,
I think there's more to it than just race finishes, race starts, qualifying results. I think he's had a few issues across the season where he's crashed cars, he's taken corners off cars and things. And in an era where every penny counts, especially for Red Bull at the moment, then you don't want drivers who are going to be taking corners off cars, left, right. I'm not saying Perez is doing this left, right, and centre, but he has done it enough times. Where a team has been hit financially, you don't want your drivers to be breaking the car. You want absolutely flawless performances every single time. It's essential that they perform, at their best and don't damage the cars. So I think that's another thing that's going to factor against him if he keeps having issues. Well, even if it is in practice, if he's breaking things, costing the team money, that's absolutely going to go against him.
Yeah, it still costs the same amount of money no matter what session he breaks it in, doesn't it? Exactly. Fair enough, there's no points on the Friday, but there's still tens of thousands of pounds and dollars of carbon fibre to be shattered. So
okay, Red Bull. We think Ferrari going to stay. Can't imagine Ferrari.
I can't see them wanting to move. Leclerc's the prodigy, and Sainz is doing more than enough to prove that he warrants a seat. So
I'd be surprised if anything changed, unless there was some crazy situation where Hamilton went over there. But I just don't see that happening. McLaren, I don't see any changes either at McLaren. They're pretty well set up for next year.
They're both heavily contracted, and they fought so hard to get to where they are. They're not giving that up anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay, so Aston Martin. Now we're getting into the interesting things, the empty seats, or potentially empty seats. Aston Martin, technically only Alonso with a contract, but we all know what Alonso's like. We all know what the performances of Stroll have been like this season. Are they going to have the same driver? Are they going to have either of the same drivers next year?
I think Alonso would only leave if he thought there was a faster car for him to go to. And looking down this list, we haven't got to Mercedes yet, but I can't see Alonso moving. And Stroll, I don't know. I think it's going to take another Alonso caliber top tier driver being available for them to finally make the decision to move Stroll on, and that's not where we are right now. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same there next year.
Yeah, it would be a bit of a shock if they did sort of give him the boot, but Lance Stroll's. I mean, when you look at the points gap between those two, obviously they're different leagues of driver, but still, when the car's that good, you expect the driver to get a lot more out of it. I think Red Bull have got the same problem with Perez. you need, and you know, the whole time we've been talking about will Perez have that seat next year? What is it about, other than Dad owning the team? What is it about Lance Stroll that keeps him in that seat? Is it purely the fact that Dad owns the team, or a senior management and investors in the team going to start to sort of apply pressure to the Strolls to get a better driver?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I think that is it. The fact that if that were any other team, if that was like Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, whatever, I don't think he'd be there this season, let alone next season.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting angle on it in the inbox, actually. We might as well grab it now, from Blaze 2010, who says, "Hello, amigos. Will Stroll get better? He had more consistent performances with broken wrists, and now he's all over the map." And there has been a period over the last 2 or 3 seasons where he has seemed to be improving. He did seem to be getting better, but I think he's plateaued pretty hard. And if anything, his driving this season has been... I mean, Vettel, he did an all right job against. Alonso has just shown him up massively.
Yeah, Vettel's
and I
an
just
interesting
can't see
comparison.
a world in which Lance Stroll improves, honestly.
I don't think the Vettel comparison is fair, because Vettel was already... He had a foot out the door, I think, that whole season. It wasn't really... His heart... You could see his heart wasn't really in it, and he looked so happy to be retired when he did announce his retirement. So I don't think that's really a complete yardstick for Stroll there. But and it just... I mean, it shows you... You know, the gap this year just shows you that, I think. I don't think Alonso is that much better than peak Sebastian Vettel, is he? Would you say? Who's better? Peak Sebastian Vettel or peak Fernando Alonso?
It depends on what era you're considering to be peak Fernando Alonso, I guess.
We'll just peak. The peak's the peak.
Yeah, but which of his eras is his best performances? Like, are you talking Renault days?
World Championship winning?
Because
I'd argue he's driven better the last couple of years than he did in his World Championship years,
I'd say current form, or at least the last year or so, the last 12 months, has probably been better
than Vettel ever was.
No, it's not better than Vettel ever was, but definitely at Alonso's best. It's difficult to say, because I think the thing is that Alonso's driven at his best in a car that's not fully capable of a race win, and Vettel drove at his best in a car that was not dominant, but a very comfortable win for him. So I think it's a very difficult comparison, where I would probably say, based on that, I would say Alonso's best is better, because he's done it in worse cars, whereas Vettel in worse cars has not been terrible, but definitely not performed to the level that we'd expect, whereas Alonso has achieved that, and if anything, maybe outperformed what you'd expect.
I can hear people in the YouTube comments smashing up their keyboards, like just hating.
I think on kind of pure against the stopwatch pace, Vettel probably has the edge, but over like a championship fight, Alonso just grinds out championship fights. Like, was it I think it was 2010 or 2011. Like, Alonso took the championship fight against Vettel to the last race in a Ferrari that was like
not as good,
third best car on the grid.
Yeah,
that is
arguably
true.
even fourth best. So
there's probably your difference between them. Out and out pace, Vettel is probably the better driver. Like one lap or clean air pace, Vettel is probably going to win in those scenarios. Alonso has better racecraft, like finding his way through traffic, managing a race, making a situation work to his favour. Tactically, Alonso is better. So I think they're both extremely good, but they are better at different things. And like Chris says, Alonso's unfortunately plays out better in more scenarios than Vettel's, because if you've not got the car to be clear at the front, Vettel's skill set doesn't win you a championship. It just means that you're there or thereabouts, whereas Alonso can drag a car that's not capable towards being close and take it to a final race of a season as well. So
you're saying he gets more out of a car potentially than what
over the course of a season, like Chris was saying. Yeah.
Sarah in the chat has just in one line kind of summed it up really nicely, which is Vettel lost championships in a better Ferrari.
Yeah,
which is absolutely true.
I'd say that's about right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just imagine if Alonso was in that car instead of imagine the fireworks between him and Hamilton. We would have had seasons just like 2021 between those two, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Right.
So
anyway,
in conclusion, Lance Stroll isn't going to get any better.
Let's move on to Haas. Hulk is widely believed to have a new contract, and Magnussen likely to get one too.
The talk at the moment seems to be they're going to keep them both.
It's kind of a sort of going from nowhere to nowhere, I think, for Haas.
Yeah, I feel like as much as I like Kevin Magnussen, I feel like there are drivers in F2 right now that would be able to do as good, if not a better job than he's done this season. But I guess with Schumacher, Haas have kind of had their fingers burned with young drivers. And I just can't see them taking that risk again in the position they're in, really.
Yeah, it does make sense for them to have experience over youth, doesn't it?
At least at the moment.
So.
And in terms of experienced drivers, there's not, I would say, a whole list of options, really, is there? Especially when you know what team you're getting into. Like, how many drivers are going to willingly move to Haas? Well, I mean, you'd say pretty much nobody on the grid is going to want to move to Haas, I would say. Maybe if you're a Bottas or something in the Alfa, but you're holding out for a factory seat in 2 years, so you see it out, don't you? Like even the drivers in the cars that are equally as bad or worse probably wouldn't consider Haas a trade up in terms of seat. So I just can't see there being anyone that's going to offer any more than what those two can offer, and also be willing to go to Haas in the current state that they're in. So I think that they're not stuck with the drivers that they've got, but it's the best options that they have right now.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Alfa Romeo next. We've got Bottas with a contract, holding out for that Audi seat, as we mentioned. And then we've got the second seat potentially up for grabs for Alfa Romeo, aka future Audi. Do you see
between Sauber?
Yeah, a nice sort of little, maybe little pack of money coming with Zhou for next year just to tie them over till the Audi guys take over?
I mean, I think Zhou's doing a good enough job this season. Anyway, to be honest, Zhou's having a pretty solid season.
That's true.
And like you say, the fact that the money comes, the fact that he opens up the Chinese market, which Audi already sell a lot of cars in China, but I'm sure they'd be happy to sell a lot more. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing with Sauber is they've got Teo Pourchaire waiting in the wings, who is a very capable driver. But yeah, I think they're probably going to stick with their current lineup.
I think currently they would stick. I agree with that. And I think Zhou is in an unfortunate position where his performance is not the sole deciding factor for whether or not he stays.
Yeah.
Like, there is going to be the
Fortunate
element
or unfortunate.
Yeah. It's going to be what Audi want soon. And if they want to bring in an Audi family driver, let's say, that they've brought through other series or something, I think out of the two of them, Zhou is unfortunately going to be the one that would lose his seat out of those two. But I think for the time being, he'd stay. Driver. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking is like they're potentially going to want to put a German driver in the car with Bottas, and I think that's unfortunately where Zhou maybe loses out. But I think there's enough there for him to get like a year deal for next year, like to keep his contract sort of ticking over. And maybe then he does enough to be, well, actually, is it Bottas that's replaced for the German driver come the Audi takeover? Like, does he do enough in the next 18 months to change those opinions? Does he do enough in the next 18 months that maybe like a resurgent Williams, let's say, wants him in their car I don't know. There's a whole
Bottas goes
host of
home.
options, isn't there? Yeah.
I don't think Bottas will be an Audi driver.
You don't?
No.
Do you think he's holding out for that but not going to get it? Is that your thought?
That's exactly what I think, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, there are rumours knocking around that Sainz has a pre-contract with Audi, especially with Andreas Seidel going there. I don't think Norris and Sainz reuniting there is out of the question. McLaren have got to do a lot over the next couple of years to convince Norris to stay, because if you were to sign any driver on the F1 grid right now, like, Norris is going to be very high on your list, especially if McLaren aren't giving him the car to do what he's capable of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think... Okay, so I think Bottas is a good fit for an Audi seat. I would like to see Bottas in an Audi seat. I would really like to see a Bottas-Sainz combo in the Audi team. I think that would be great. I don't think the Audi team are going to be winning races anytime soon. Certainly not in 2026, is it? They're supposed to be coming in.
Yeah.
The advantage Bottas has is that he was once a Mercedes driver, and he has all that experience in an absolute tippy-top team, all that operational experience, all of that, that know-how of how to win Constructors' Championships. He's got all that in the bank, and I think for at least a season, Audi are going to want to tap some of that out of him to really upgrade what is now the Alfa Romeo team. And it's clearly, Sauber team, they just don't have the equipment that they're in. I think they're in a similar. I would say they're in a similar situation to Williams in that they don't have the processes and the setup there that maybe the top teams have, and therefore they don't have the knowledge other than in the former Mercedes drivers. So the Audi bods are going to get in there and be like, right, how did Mercedes do it? What do we need to upgrade? And Bottas really, unless they poach loads of staff from Ferrari, Bottas is the only person who's going to have a decent amount of knowledge about that. So I think he's safe at least for his first year. I think Zhou, I already said it. Like, Zhou does bring a nice little packet of cash with him to keep the team tiding over for the next couple of seasons. So, and he is performing quite well. So I don't see any reason why the driver lineup should change there at the moment. I mean, talking about, let's try and keep it to 2024 contracts and not sort of 2026 contracts. But I think maybe these will get... Bottas has got... Obviously, Bottas already got his contract. I think Zhou might get a contract up to 2026, conditional on performance. And if he's performing really well, maybe they'll keep him for another year as well, just for a bit of overlap. But yeah, I mean, we're a long way in the distance there, and we've got to get through 2024 first. Shall we move on to Williams?
Let's.
So Albon has a contract for next year, and Sargent does not. But Sargent does also bring cash, I believe. I think he's got.
He brings cash. He brings America.
America.
Yeah, I mean, Williams have got some exciting young drivers at the moment, like Zach O'Sullivan, Franco Colapinto, but they're all in F3 currently. So
they've got nobody higher than that, have they, at the moment?
No. So all their young drivers are at least a couple of years away from F1.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, there's a possibility that one of the other teams has a change and someone like a Bottas or a Stroll or a Gasly becomes available that they might want to snap up. But is Sargent doing enough this year to keep his seat?
I suppose it depends on what you're comparing to, doesn't it? I think when they've got no other young drivers in their own academy, the answer is going to be yes, because they've got nowhere else to go in that for at least a year or two. Are Williams as a team doing enough to poach somebody of Albon's current performance level? Probably not. I don't know. I think it'd be considered a bit of a steal if they did. So I think this is one of those where, I mean, they put up with Nicholas Latifi for so long. I feel like Logan Sargent will at least get a second season at it. They
were under different management then, though.
True, there is that.
I think as the performances, it really depends for me on what happens in that. I don't think he's going to be renewed anytime soon. I think they'll wait. They're not doing this in season. They're going to wait until the end of the
this will
season.
be one that goes to the end of the season. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, they don't need to mess around with their driver line. They've got enough to clean up at Williams. They don't need to be messing around, updating drivers, changing. Unless something happens, someone gets an injury or someone can't drive for whatever reason, gets COVID or something, then yeah, obviously you're going to have to start thinking about one of your reserve drivers. Maybe they'll get Latifi back. But I think really, he does bring cash, and that you can't rule him out for next season for that reason. I think it's a team that's pretty cash strapped historically. Whatever, even though they have got, I think, Dorlinton Capital still sort of funding them quite a lot. I think you would imagine like an investment firm like that, they're not going to just infinitely give them money. Like they're going to want to start to see improvement, which the improvement is coming. But as that improvement comes, you're then going to start to need, depending on how much improvement comes this season, you are going to want a driver lineup that reflects that. So it's that balance, isn't it? Like, it's that old thing of, is it really worth having the cheap driver who brings a load of cash, who isn't necessarily great, or do you get a better driver in there or get you the results and get you more money that way from finishing higher in the standings? And I think Williams are one of those teams that are right on that balance, aren't they? They're right on that knife edge of a driver potentially bringing them loads and loads of cash and making a difference that way. But if they got the better driver, maybe they'd just finish higher and get loads of cash anyway.
Yeah. And I guess they're not so desperate for cash these days that is a clear-cut decision, is it? Like,
yeah.
There was a period of time when they just had to take the driver that brought the most with them, but it's not as much of an issue for that team anymore.
Yeah. The thing I was going to add was the problem for them at the moment is probably attracting that better driver. Like, they're a team that's maybe not going to be attractive to someone that can give them performances right now. Maybe by the end of the season, if things keep on the trajectory, that's changed, and those winter contract talks do involve more significant drivers. But I think that until this trajectory kind of continues and gets to a certain point, they'll not attract the drivers that can give them those kind of performances until maybe this time next season, and then that's when your silly season of who's going to replace Sargent comes around.
Okay, so here's a fun thought experiment for you. Does a world exist, a dimension exist, where Lewis Hamilton doesn't sign a contract for Mercedes and decides to go back to basics and start new game plus and go back to the beginning with Williams and see if he can build himself another world championship from the ground up?
No.
Over the course of his remaining years in Formula One?
No.
Short answer. No.
I've already given it.
It'd be kind of fun though, wouldn't it?
It would.
I'm not denying it'd be a brilliant thing to witness. However, the likelihood, I don't think there is an alternate universe out there where that is happening. Unless it's like my F1 22 manager save, it's not happening.
Okay, so we're into Mercedes then. Russell does have a contract. Hamilton obviously still hasn't agreed a new one. What's going on at Mercedes?
Well, Russell's contracted, isn't he?
Yeah, until the end of next season.
Russell does have a contract to the end of next season.
And
yeah, I mean, I feel like we get this a lot with Hamilton in recent years. Like, there's always all this like, oh, he hasn't signed a contract yet, and like, it just takes a while, and then they do anyway. Yeah. Like, there's been reports in the last few days that he's been personally approached by John Elkann, the Ferrari CEO, about driving for them. Like up to like $50 million contracts, I think I've seen bandied around. Like, and the phrase I saw in the news story about this I read was that Lewis Hamilton politely turned him down. Yeah, I can't see Hamilton. I can't see him driving for anyone else between now and when he chooses to retire. I think there was a time when a switch to Ferrari may have interested him. I think that time's probably passed now.
I don't think that's ever. Well, mate, there might have been. I'm sure conversations have happened in the past. He's had a long career. Like, of course, like they would have been knocking at the door at some point. Hamilton to Ferrari. I mean, it's hearsay, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is not happening.
Yeah, I think the current instance of it, yes, is like it's paddock whispers, isn't it? It's just people trying to unsettle things, but
it's
people trying to get clicks. But I would say, obviously, the prestige of Ferrari and all that kind of stuff. I think that when you're a driver in the position of the likes of Vettel, Alonso, Hamilton, even Verstappen, there's probably always going to be something that is, can I go there and be the one that brings a title back to them? Like, the thing is, I think that the next driver that goes and like does that will probably be held in as higher esteem in Ferrari folklore as like Schumacher for the running titles. Do you know what I mean? Like the next driver that does it. I mean, we're talking 2007 Kimi Räikkönen, right? Like, it's been so long that the next driver that, I mean, it's unlikely that they're going to get one within 20 years of Räikkönen's. Let's put it that way. Like, they're going to have to be on it with what comes in 2026 if they want a title within this 20-year window. And if a driver does achieve that, it will be up there in like the Ferrari tales of old for like decades to come. And I think the lore of that, if Ferrari were like, Lewis, this, do you know, like the whole Mercedes thing of, this is the car we've got, we can give you titles for the first 2 or 3 seasons of this formula. This is what we've got to go to track with. If that situation did fall right, I don't think he'd be able to resist. I'm not saying it will.
I'm sold.
I think that's the scenario that does it for him.
You need to go and work for Ferrari, man. Because if you sit you down in an office with Lewis Hamilton and say all that to him, and he's changing teams, dude.
I mean, give me 5 minutes, I'll go switch caps. I've got the wrong cap on for this conversation.
Yeah. That's literally like new game plus and then maximum difficulty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'd be right now. I think you'd be out of your mind to go to Ferrari. I think
they're just not doing anything to demonstrate that
the capability of it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But you know, if you like a challenge, it'll be a challenge. So...
Like, you look at when Hamilton first went to Mercedes and everyone said he was mad, but like they sat him down and was like, this is where we're at, this is what we're working on, this is how we're going to do it. And that's how they convinced him to go. And I
don't see Ferrari doing that though. I don't think Ferrari are organised enough as a setup to even process that.
You know what Ferrari don't have in that regard is they don't have what Mercedes had in the whole Lauda thing going on. Like, Nicky was a huge part of sitting Lewis down and showing him what this plan was, how it was going to become what it is, or what it has been at least. And
the sort of Godfather effect.
Yeah, and having a driver of that caliber that you know is also capable of understanding and developing a car, sit you down and essentially show you what is coming. I think there's an element of faith that someone in Lewis's position at the time could put in that and be like, you know what, this is like, there's a reason Michael came back briefly to help them. There's a reason that I'm the one being approached here by Niki Lauda. Like, there's just so many things that feel right in that scenario.
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone that Ferrari have got in place currently that you could say the same about, unless you put me in charge, as Stu said earlier.
Sadly, the only name that comes to mind with Ferrari history that could maybe do that role is Michael Schumacher.
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone else who would have been able to do that. And sadly, obviously, we're not in a world where that's possible.
You've got your Emerson Fittipaldis of the world as well. Like, that's a...
There are... I mean...
But...
Kimi Räikkönen, he's a good talker, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you get Kimi Räikkönen out of bed to come into the office to do the convincing, to be honest. But anyway, so Hamilton, we don't know. We expect him to be at Mercedes
I
this
think
year,
he
right?
will.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, final one, Alfa Tauri. As usual for them, both drivers only on 1 season contracts currently, or if you're Daniel Ricciardo, half a season contract.
Well, yeah.
What happens there? There's potential for a seat to become free if Red Bull do something about Perez.
They've got a lot of junior talent at the moment. I mean, Liam Lawson's top of the list. He had a great time in F3 and F2, and he's phenomenal in Super Formula this year. And then, they've got like Dennis Hauger, Jack Crawford, Yuma Iwasa. He's actually looking really good these days. They're kind of spoiled for choice with junior drivers. I think Tsunoda's doing a good enough job this year to keep his seat.
I agree.
Yep.
So I think it really depends on what comes of Daniel Ricciardo, doesn't it? Whether another seat becomes available that year. Yeah,
it feels like they've thrown a lot of eggs in the Daniel Ricciardo basket, doesn't it?
Yes, it really does.
I think this comes from what Chris is saying there, though, is it wasn't working with De Vries. Throw what we've got left for this season at Ricciardo. If it works and he becomes like a perfect teammate for Verstappen for next season off the back of this half season, then they look like geniuses because it worked. If it doesn't, he's on a half-year contract. They go, well, we tried, and they've got a ton of young drivers to like be spoiled for choice over. So I don't think they can lose in reality because it can't really be worse than De Vries, unfortunately, was doing. And if it goes exceptionally well, like I say, they've got something for the future. And if it's middle of the road, they can easily bring in someone like Liam Lawson or any of the other drivers like Chris has mentioned. So as much as it is all eggs, one basket, I can't see there being a lose scenario, in all honesty.
No, that's true. Yeah, if you're saying if he doesn't do great for the remainder of the season, Daniel Ricciardo, that they can quite easily just put someone else in that seat. I guess you're right, aren't you?
What I can maybe see happening is Perez keeps his drive for next year. Ricciardo and Tsunoda stay at AlphaTauri, and it's like next year for AlphaTauri is basically like whichever one of the two of you is better this year gets Perez's seat for 2025.
Yeah,
that would be a pretty spicy subplot for next season.
Yeah, that'd keep you tuned in, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
There you go. I think that's enough. I think that's kind of we've kind of covered everyone there.
It's kind of where we're at. Yeah,
few interesting angles.
It is weirdly quiet for this time of year from this point of view, isn't it?
It is. You just know that, like, we're recording this now, and tomorrow morning there's going to be some crazy announcement: Hamilton to Ferrari, or Hamilton to McLaren, or Hamilton to somewhere you'd just never expect him to go. Hamilton to Aston, and Stroll's been booted out. Who knows? But right now, as things stand on the 14th of August, 2023, then that's where things are at. So. Yeah, tomorrow when this is completely out of date, we'll have egg on our faces. Shall we move on to some inbox?
Yeah, it might have been worth mentioning the time, to be fair, because knowing our look, like by 8 p.m. they'll have probably announced something that just makes all this redundant.
Yeah, it is 1938 on the 14th of the 8th, 2023.
Let's do it.
That is what next season looks like to us.
Keep me saying now. Stay out. Box.
Hey man, I'll take the first one. Benson says, "Hey man, as we are now about a year from the beginning of the demise of Alpine, a year on from the beginning of the demise of Alpine, do you think it would have made any sense if Alonso had stayed and they had signed Piastri? I think their season would have gone a little bit. I genuinely think their season would have gone differently. I think the car development would have been different, and I think Fernando Alonso wouldn't have been, the start of the season, the first race of the season, or the second race of the season, their drivers are crashing into each other. So I don't believe Alonso would have made that same mistake, and I don't think Piastri would have been near enough to him to make that mistake at that stage.
I also think they are lucky they don't have a driver as vocal as Alonso with everything that's going on as that team, because Gasly and Ocon have both stayed pretty diplomatic, but
You could argue that they need a driver as Fernando
well,
Alonso
potentially,
to be the spine of the team and keep the glue, the glue that keeps it together.
spine is a thing that team seems to have in quite short supply at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I think there'd definitely be more chance of them at least being able to somewhat develop out of the problems that they're in with someone like Alonso in the team. Like, I feel like he could have at least guided things in the right direction with feedback and testing in FP sessions and stuff like that, but not enough to drastically change. Like, I feel like there's too much in turmoil higher up that even a driver with a lot of experience and talent can't essentially achieve much better than what the other two are already doing.
Alonso and Piastri would have arguably been one of the best driver lineups on the grid as well.
Yeah, it would have been very interesting to see. Very interesting.
Yeah, the way they let both of them slip through their fingers is hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious or super depressing, depending on sort of how you look at it. I think I quite liked I do quite like Otmar Safnauer. I think I was actually a bit gutted when he went to that team, if I'm honest. I would have preferred him to stay at Aston Martin. I think a lot of the success you're seeing now at Aston Martin comes from the groundwork that he put in the first place. So
yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, it's a shame that he's ended up where he is, just without a team. Hopefully he finds himself another team to at least...
I don't think it'll take long.
...tie into in some capacity. Shall we do the next question?
Yeah. Darth Kilowog says, of the multiple rumoured entrants for the proverbial 11th spot in the paddock, which would you be most excited for, and who is your driver lineup going to be?
Ooh.
So there's no official list. We think there's been 5 entries. Obviously, Andretti Cadillac, we all know about. High Tech is a name you'll know from F2 and F3 and F4, actually. And they've got like Kazakh businessman money. Rodin Carlin, which is another feeder series name. Interestingly read today, they've said if they got the entry, they would design and build all their cars in New Zealand. And also, I forgot the guy's name who runs that team, has funded Jamie Chadwick for a lot of her career. And he said if we get a spot, we'll probably put her in one of our cars.
I don't know how involved
cool.
he is, but it was Trevor Carlin's team, wasn't it? I don't know how involved he is since he became Rodin Carlin, because it's...
Yeah, this was definitely another name I read, but I can't remember what name it was. We've talked about Formula Equal before, which is the team that wants to have a 50-50 male and female split in the team. And then there's one I've not heard about until I read today called LKY Sons with a Z. They were co-founded by a guy called Benjamin Duran, who you may remember in 2019 there was a team called Panthera Team Asia that tried to enter and didn't get a spot. And they say their vision is fusing youth culture and racing to create a team that will disrupt F1. Blah, 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 blah. To support our plans, we've already brought on board an impressive team of motorsport executives, music and entertainment industry experts, and creatives who will help bring this vision to life, which all just sounds awful, to be honest.
Oh, it sounds very exciting.
Absolute nonsense.
It sounds like an awful storyline in the career mode of the game.
It really does, doesn't it? Yeah.
It really does. Or that TikTok have started an F1 team.
I mean, Andretti's obviously the team that most people want from that list to get the spot, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
I'd like to see it. There's a reason why there are a few teams against Andretti appearing in Formula One, and that's because they're a bit scared of him. I think they know the potential of that team. They know they've got the resource to be a true disruptor in Formula One on the track, which is where it counts. So. I'd like. I don't know what all the fuss is. I'd like to see Cadillac,
and they've already got a Renault engine deal lined up as well. So like everything's there, and
oven baked driver lineup team ready to go.
Yeah, and then in terms of drivers, I mean, take your pick from IndyCar. Really, like I'd love to see them come in and bring a couple of like Alex Palou is just a shoe-in. I think he'd be phenomenal in Formula One.
And he's recently detached from McLaren as well.
Yeah. That whole thing's kind of blown up a little bit again recently, but he is basically not there. I mean, the fact that Andretti have just won a single-seater world championship in Formula E isn't going to hurt their chances. Who else would you want to drive that car? I don't think Colton Herta is going to happen now. He's not got enough super license points by quite a long stretch now.
Maybe JB Chadwick. Maybe maybe they could like do something crazy with their brand, and again,
Maybe.
like, if we're talking about disrupting F1, not that this team have said that that's their aim, but of course, any team who comes into Formula One their aim is to disrupt Formula One on the racetrack. So be different, like a female driver in Formula One would be sick. I think any Formula One team would bite your hand off for a really, really good, really fast female competitor who can mix it with the top dogs. So yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Andretti, the most interesting team on that list for me. Shall we go to the next question?
Yeah, next question from Eugene Risto. Can you clarify something if possible? Apologies if it sounds silly. It's fine. No silly questions around here. Are the tyre
Plenty
stripe
silly
colours,
answers though.
Yeah. Are the tyre stripe colours which show what compound a team is using done to make it known to the public? Because at Spa, when the softs were going on and it was still drizzling, wouldn't it be more entertaining to have no colour striping? So in such occasions, other teams aren't relying on knowing what others have switched to in order to make up their own mind.
No, don't. No. Keep Eugene away from. Okay, so you obviously weren't watching Formula One when we were begging Bridgestone to have a differentiator, so we as an audience could tell which tyre the drivers were on.
The closest we ever got was the little green line in the tread, wasn't there?
Well, that was the first time they did it, and that was in the 2000. I want to say 2007 or 8 season.
It was definitely there for 9, but maybe a year or two before that as well. Yeah,
yeah, and then they moved to having the green strip around the outside edge of the tire because they moved from groove tires.
Oh, yeah, that was in 2009 was when they did that.
Yeah, they moved. That was when they went from groove tires to non-groove tire to full slick tires. And yeah, before it was inside the groove, you had the white stripes on the softer tire. But before that, you had nothing. And as an audience member, there was no visual differentiator between the soft tire and the hard tire on a given weekend. But in those days, there was I'm sure there were many compounds that they would bring over.
There's only 2, I think.
But was there literally just 2 compounds for an entire season?
The prime and the option, that's all they had. And I think that the hardness of them changed race by race like they do now. But it was always prime and option, nothing else.
That was the first era of the mandated use of both compounds, I think, wasn't it, as well?
I believe it was, yeah.
Where they first
it does make sense. The reason it exists is because it makes sense from an audience perspective to be able to tell what driver is on what tire, so you can see it just adds to the narrative. I think having the audience guessing which compound drivers are on and not having a differentiator takes away the narrative away. It makes it less fun to watch because you're not able to decipher what's going on, quite the reason why this driver is so much faster than the other driver in a particular point in a stint. So, let's keep the colours on the tires.
Yeah, I think as well.
Eugene's. Go on, Tom.
Go on. I was going to say that I think we've got the happy medium at the minute as well, because it's not that long since we had 7 different colours of tyre. Because the way that it worked is there's all these different compounds because of the different characteristics of tracks, but instead of it just being red, yellow, white for soft, medium, and hard, it was ultra hyper soft. Was it like a pinky purple?
Yeah, it's ultra soft,
all the way
up,
all the way up to the blue and white, like really hard tires, and they'd bring like different color sets to each track. Whereas now, at least the colors stay consistent for the viewing audience, and for those of us that want to be in detail about it, if it's like the C1 or the C5 or where it is on the scale, it's known, but the colours at least remain consistent. And that was like too far the other way.
Yeah. And so the other thing here is you mentioned, teams making up their own mind. Like they're already making it. They're not looking at what other cars are using and copying off them. Their car works. Each car works with the tyre in its own unique way. And it's it's better for the teams don't really care what tires the other teams.
I don't know. I think there is an element of reacting to other teams. You're not going to copy them, but you're going to maybe to go a bit Ferrari. You're maybe going to adjust between Plan A and B and C depending on what your rival has done. Like I can see what Eugene's getting at here, but
when it makes a difference is during safety cars. Like in 2021, when the end of the season happened. I mean, it's kind of obvious still anyway. If the car behind comes in pits, they're obviously going to put the softest compound available onto them anyway. So you're kind of in a vulnerable situation there anyway. But still, like, yes, I guess the team's not being able to have a visual reference as to what tyre the other team is on could add something maybe to the dynamic or take something away from the dynamic.
The problem is...
Make it difficult. I don't know.
The problem is that only becomes interesting if you as a viewer know, but as soon as you as a viewer know, then all the teams end up knowing anyway, so you're back to square one.
Yeah.
So I can hear like some furious YouTube comment typing over this, so I think we should move on really quick.
People love tyres.
One final thought on that. As much as I know that the current tyre colour system is objectively much better, part of me still kind of misses the old Pirelli rainbow.
Well, the whole thing, like the whole reason they did that is just to show that Pirelli can make lots and lots of different kinds of tyre. It's purely a marketing exercise, and it unfortunately it convoluted what should have always been
massively overcomplicated.
Quite a simple thing for everyone to understand. So, I mean, I think you go even better than that. For the tyres are out for tender now, and I think you could simplify it further by going back to just 2 compounds of tyre for the entire season. And it'd save whatever tyre manufacturer it is a whole lot of money if you just got 2 sets and you design your Formula 1 car to those 2 sets of Formula 1 tyre. Everyone's in the same boat. I don't know why you need all these different compounds of tyre.
And how often do you see all 3 compounds used in a Grand Prix? 90% of the time. You
do often see all 3 compounds used, but I think across the season, you don't need 6 compounds of tyre. I guess you could make the tyres a little bit harder and have them just last on most tracks, and then that way you'd have certain you'd have more of a differentiator when you do get to a track that is harder on the tyres, and go on.
If anything, I think we need softer tyres because everyone just one-stops everywhere now. But that's a whole other discussion.
Well, maybe softer tyres, but even so, that just means that people will just use more of that compound of tyre over the course of a race. They might
and then you're back
cars
to
might have to. You'd have races. You'd be back in a world where you have races that sometimes you'll have 3 stops and other times you'll have 1 stop. Whereas right now, you only ever have 1-stop races because they bring tyres that produce 1-stop races.
Yeah.
And for me, some of the best races and some of the best seasons have been seasons where there has been more than 1 pit stop. And I don't know, we've sort of quietly moved back into this world where we're having 1-stop races again. And I think it's a bit it takes away from the show. That pit stops are one of the most exciting parts of Formula 1. Seeing them change those tyres as quick as they do. And the jeopardy of it all, I'm very happy for there to be more of that. And for some reason, they seem to have, for all their talk about the show, they've kind of taken that away from us, and I don't quite know why.
Yeah.
Well, at the behest of the teams is why. But anyway,
exactly.
Next question. Danny Page says, when are we going to get some silly season, or are we finally in the season where most teams stand pat?
I've honestly got a feeling we might end up with exactly the same driver lineup next year, looking at down that list.
As well. I mean, we've just done a whole thing about silly season, so I don't think we need to go into too much detail.
It's going to be one of those years where it's either going to stay exactly the same, or there'll be one unexpected change that just causes like a cascade of mad changes. But I've got a feeling it's going to be the former.
Cool. Yeah. And the last question.
Yeah, last one's from Michelle saying, do you see Oscar becoming a better driver than Lando in coming seasons?
Ooh, I don't see why not. If he keeps improving at the rate he's improving.
The potential's there, isn't it? His junior formula speaks for that.
One of the few current younger drivers that has the potential to, for sure.
But also, Lando Norris is still improving, remember? So I think you could
Not like
see
he's standing still.
It'd be what would interest me would be a sort of a 4-way fight between McLaren and Red Bull next season for a world championship. I would love to see that. You know, Daniel Ricciardo against Max Verstappen, against Oscar Piastri, against Lando Norris. That would be an epic Formula One season.
So you're moving Perez then?
Oh yeah. He's gone. And on that note, we will finish. So if you've got this far, thank you so much for listening. Do remember to hit the subscribe button. And if you really like what you're seeing, visit patreon.com and bung us a like on there. So yeah, that's it for this week. We will be back next week with our preview of the Dutch Grand Prix.
Wow, it's that time already.
It's that time already. You can find us on all the socials, X, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, we're there. Just Google Back of the Grid. And there's the prediction league and everything. If you want to get in touch, just leave us a comment or send us an email. And yeah, that's it for this week. So we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye everyone.